Nintendo finished Star Fox 2 in 1995, then buried it for 22 years. This is why. In 1995, Nintendo finished a game. Not almost finished, completed, and had a release date. Nintendo Power had already listed it with an August 1995 release date, and then Nintendo canceled it. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. For 22 years, that game sat in a vault while the console it was built for faded into memory. We were playing on other things, growing up, and moving on, never knowing that one of the most ambitious games made for the Super Nintendo was sitting in a drawer somewhere in Kyoto. This is the story of Star Fox 2. To understand why this cancellation hurts so much, you need to understand that what the original Star Fox meant. The SNES was 2 years old. Nintendo needed something that would stop people from talking about the Sega Genesis. And one thing they got was Star Fox, a game that did something nobody believed would be possible on a 16-bit console. Real 3D polygon graphics on a Super Nintendo in 1993. The secret was the Super FX chip, a coprocessor Argonaut software built that essentially helped the Super Nintendo with the heavy lifting. A dedicated graphics processor sitting inside the cartridge itself. When Star Fox loaded on your TV for the first time, it didn't look like anything else on the system at the time. It sold millions. It proved that the SNES could still surprise people, and the sales numbers made a sequel inevitable. Even Slippy saw it coming, and Slippy never sees anything. Development on Star Fox 2 started in 1993. It started almost immediately after launching the original Star Fox. Argonaut's Dylan Cuthbert led the programming. The same team, the same ambition. But this time, they were going further. The original Star Fox was a linear 3D rail shooter. You flew in one direction, enemies came at you. It was spectacular, but it was limited. Star Fox 2 threw that out entirely. An open solar system, real-time strategy elements, multiple playable characters, including the first female pilot in the Star Fox universe, and a new chip, the Super FX2, that pushed the SNES harder than anyone had ever pushed it before. This wasn't a sequel, this was re-innovation. By 1995, it was done. Fully completed, tested, ready. And then something changed overnight. In late 1994, Sony launched the PlayStation in Japan. And also around that same time, Sega launched the Saturn. Suddenly, the 3D graphics that had made Star Fox revolutionary in 1993 looked pretty primitive against what these new machines could do. Texture mapped worlds, smooth polygons, the process power of the PlayStation and Sega Saturn made the Super FX2 chip look like old technology. Nintendo had a problem. They had a completed Star Fox 2 sitting on a 16-bit console in a world that had just gone 32-bit overnight. And they had something else looming. The launch of the Nintendo 64, a machine that would make everything on the Super FX chip had ever done look like a rough draft. The decision came all the way from Miyamoto himself, in his own words. We finished it in 1995, but the next year the release of the N64 was coming up. The price was high, and the timing of the release came out awkward. So we decided to cancel it and start from scratch with a new Starfox game for Nintendo 64. Clean break, that was the logic. No 16-bit 3D games to muddy the water before the N64 redefined what 3D could be. It made business sense, and it was probably the right call commercially. But here's what it meant in practice. A fully completed game that was killed by a bad release date in an upcoming release of the N64. Here's the part that stings. In September of 1995, Electronic Gaming Monthly reported that Starfox 2 had been quietly canceled. Nintendo Power pushed back. They told readers the game was not on hold, that better graphics were coming. That was the first half of 1996. This was the last official word Nintendo ever gave on Starfox 2. None of it was true. None of it. The game was already dead. Nintendo knew it, and they let an entire generation of fans keep waiting for something that was never going to arrive. Before we get to how this story finally ends, if you're new here, please hit subscribe. This is Raised on SNES. Every week, we dig into stories behind the console that raised us. Like the video if you're with me so far, it tells the algorithm that retro storytelling is worth pushing. Now back to the video, because the story gets even better. Nintendo buried it, but they couldn't keep it buried forever. In 1999, an early tech demo released online. And in 2002, an anonymous person leaked a near-complete ROM of the finished game. The internet went quiet for a second, and then it went absolutely wild. People played it, patched it, translated it, and kept it alive through emulators and fan communities for 15 years while Nintendo said nothing. A finished game running perfectly on a hardware that no longer exists in people's homes. The fans did what Nintendo wouldn't. They made sure it survived. In 2017, Nintendo announced the SNES Classic Edition. 21 built-in games, and one that nobody expected. Starfox 2. 22 years after it was finished, 22 years after Nintendo canceled it, it was finally, officially released. One of the developers of the SNES Classic had fought for it internally. When Nintendo European Research and Development, codename Nerd, that's awesome. That reminds me of the codename Mario inside the first Starfox. Anyways, they began working on the console's emulator. They realized they needed a test case for the custom Super FX chip, and they happened to locate the complete English and Japanese source code for Starfox 2. The developer said the game was finished and deserves to be played. He was right, and Shigeru Miyamoto agreed. Here's what the story tells us about the era we were raised on. Nintendo was so far ahead of themselves in '95 that they killed a finished game because it wasn't good enough for the future they were building. That's not a company playing it safe. That's a company that believed the next Starfox game they were making was going to be so far beyond what anyone had ever seen that even a completed and ready-to-ship game wasn't worth releasing on the way there. We were raised on that ambition, on a console that pushed so hard it buried its own finished work just to protect what comes next. That's the SNES. That's the era that raised us. Thanks for watching.